Life is a movie in which the actors are sometimes ruthless to each other. My name is Kimani. I am 28 years old and I come from DR Congo. I will tell you my story. Before we continue with the story, do not forget to click on the notification button in order to get notified at every new video posted. Thank you. My childhood had started quite normally. My mom met my dad very young and got married to him at the age of 25. And just a few months after their union, Mom discovered that she was pregnant. It was a huge joy for my father, who was young administrative executive at the time. He had dreamed so much of having this perfect little family that it was not long before he started shopping for baby clothes. Relatives told me that in the second month of my mother's pregnancy, Dad had already bought a crib and 2 suitcases full of clothes. He was so happy. My grandmother also told me how much he pampered my mom. He was caring, proved that he loved us more than anything. But unfortunately, the happiness was short-lived. My dad was sent on a mission to the interior of the country, and unfortunately, due to an altercation with rebel militia, he lost his life following a bullet in the head. The news of his death was like a stab in the heart of my mother and all her loved ones. Such a good and humble man had gone, leaving behind him a woman who awaited the fruit of their love. No amount of moral support was enough to keep my mother's mind straight. My mother had continued the course of her pregnancy on her own, despite the presence of my father's family members who were sympathetic and did their best to ensure that she lacked nothing. Grief could be seen all over her face. Besides, I was told that every time she went into the room my father prepared for me, she burst into tears. Memories of her lifetime came back to her, not to mention all the projects she had with my dad. The agony was so noticeable that she began to lose weight considerably. A few months later, I was there, alongside the one who would be now the one and only rampart in this world for me. My mother welcomed me and gave me all the love she had. I remember that until I reached the age of 5, she was always telling me this: remember that you are the most precious thing that I have in this world. Words that, despite the absence of my second pillar, gave me immeasurable warmth. In addition, every night before I fell asleep, told me stories of her and Dad, so that I would never forget where I come from and the person whose descendant I was. I even think that it's thanks to these stories about my dad that I was able to hold on, despite the difficulties that I experienced later in life. When I was 10, there was a significant change in my family structure. Mom met a man who was finally able to make her happy. Uncle Hubert, as I've always called him, came into my mom's life like a breath of fresh air. After several years of confinement, Mom had withdrawn into herself for several years because of the pain she experienced at the loss of my dad, but also for fear of traumatizing me by devoting herself to a new love affair. But by the force of circumstances, she ended up smiling back to life. Something that made me happy because I was tired of seeing my mom's sad face every time she saw a couple in front of us. Initially, Uncle Hubert spent every weekend at home. He brought me sweets and lots of other good things to eat. Then we would either go to the park or to the mall to shop. And while I was having fun at the playground in the mall or on swings in the park, he held long conversations with my mother. Weekends had become the happiest times of the week for me because not only did I have the opportunity to have treats that I craved, we went on beautiful places and I had the opportunity to see my mother smile and sometimes even laugh out loud. So it was only natural that I accepted Uncle Hubert as my stepfather. A few months after their meeting, my stepfather and my mother said yes in front of God and men. And as you can guess, I was over the moon. It was once in my mom's matrimonial home that things started to go downhill with my stepfather. He, who was so attentive to me, began to act more and more violently. Despite my young age, he imposed household chores on me which were clearly beyond my strength. Each time I was punished for yes or no, and despite the fact that I tried to talk to Mom about it several times, she always told me that I was starting to become a big girl and there were responsibilities that I would now have to assume. She also told me that the sooner or later I was going to end up having little brothers and that I absolutely had to learn to take care of people so that they didn't miss anything when the time came. These words ended up convincing me, and the more time passed, the less I complained. This physical and psychological pressure continued until I was 12 years old. I vividly remember one day, a few months before my birthday, when I was home alone. I was watching the TV after finishing my chores, and I had a very bad cramp in my lower abdomen. I was scared because it was something that I had never experienced before. I was writhing in pain, and once I couldn't take it anymore, I headed to the bathroom to try to see if I wasn't suffering from indigestion. It was then that I took off my underwear, and I realized that it was stained with blood. I panicked. I thought I was going to die. And for fear of my mother, who was cold at me, I proceeded to try to wipe off the blood from my underwear. And during the process, I totally forgot to close the bathroom door behind me. It was then that my stepfather appeared out of nowhere, and at the sight of the panic on my face, asked me what was going on. All in tears, I couldn't even explain to him what was happening. But seeing that I had my underwear in my hands and still soaked in blood, he guessed what was happening and looked at me in the eyes, wondering if it was the first time. Still traumatized by what was happening, I couldn't even say a word. I just nodded. Then he asked me to finish cleaning up and join him in the living room. When I was done cleaning myself, I joined him in the living room and sat down in front of him with my head down. Then he spoke to me saying, "Congratulations, Kimani." I was lost. In a trembling voice, I asked him, "Why, uncle?" He replied with a smile, "Simply because you are becoming a woman. You know, what happened earlier was just a sign from your body to tell you that you are fully developed. From now on, the world will no longer be the same for you." Despite this brief explanation, I was still lost. I really couldn't figure out what my stepfather was saying to me. But he didn't stop there. He continued thus, "I bet you have a boyfriend. This lucky one will have the opportunity to discover you very soon." This sentence made me even more uncomfortable than the previous ones. And so, my uncle continued with his speech with a sentence that I will never forget. "But before your boyfriend does anything, I'll be the first to taste you. You'll have to let me know when your bleeding stops. Okay?" I admit that at the time, I didn't really know what awaited me. But like the good child that I was, I promised my stepdad that I was going to tell him when the bleeding would stop. But before going to his room, he made me a point of honor to let me know that my mom must not be aware of what we had just discussed, and let alone what had just happened. And I obeyed him. 5 days later, I saw my bleeding stop, and naively I let my stepfather know. And so, that night I suffered my first abuse. That night is still engraved in my head. He snuck into my room late at night, long after my mother had fallen asleep, and done his dirty work. I was so naive that, despite the pain that took all over me, I didn't make a single sound. I was paralyzed by what was happening. I would have loved to have the support of somebody who was more enlightened than me at the time. I wouldn't have gone through all that ordeal. After the first night, he came back to my room again and again, and the scenario repeated itself. The abuses went on for endless months, and since I didn't know my body yet, months later, I hadn't noticed that my period had stopped appearing. I felt worse and worse, and more tired. I had constipation that was ruining my life, but the feeling of my guilt kept me from telling my mother about it. And the more weeks passed, the worse I felt, until my mother noticed my state. One day she sat me down and asked me a few questions about what was going on. She asked me if I had ever had discharge of blood, and despite the fear that gnawed at me, I answered her in the affirmative. She asked me since when, and I gave her the exact date of the beginning of my menstruation. Then she asked me if during months before our conversation I had seen them again, and I said no. She began to panic and asked me the question of whether a man had approached me. Seized with fear, I answered no. She saw on my face that I was lying, and she insisted. I started crying and buried myself in my room. She followed me and took me by the arm so that I could go to the hospital to make a blood test. Once the results came out, we had the confirmation that I was pregnant. That day, I received the spanking of my life. My mother called me names, slapping me and kicking me. Her reaction was so violent that she asked me who was the responsible of my pregnancy. I was afraid to add a layer by saying he was my stepfather, so I told her that I didn't know. She called me a tramp and kicked me out of the house. That's how I ended up at my grandmother's house. And to her, I was able to tell the true version of the story. Grandma believed me and tried to talk to my mom about it. It was then that, on learning the truth, my mother asked for a divorce and filed in a complaint against my stepfather for child abuse. As for me, I didn't have an abortion. I kept my baby, and today, thanks to God, Mom and I are taking care of him. My stepfather was jailed for 20 years and is still serving his sentence.